Amanda Paletz, and I'm the legal director of the Joseph Project. And we are going to talk about tips and strategies for successful representation of survivors in court. The trauma that a survivor may be experiencing as a result of being exploited also bleeds into their experience in the courtroom. Oftentimes, the survivor's prior court experiences have been extremely negative. This can be for a variety of reasons. They may have had criminal convictions as a result of their exploitation. They may have charges for solicitation, drug-related offenses, retail fraud, all things that are in some way or shape or form related to their exploitation. So going back to court to deal with these issues can be extremely triggering and difficult for them to deal with. Some survivors have negative court experiences related to their custody of their minor children. They may have lost their children during the course of their exploitation, and they're now seeking to be reunited. So any issues regarding custody and parenting time can be extremely difficult for survivors. In some situations, a survivor may have cooperated with the prosecution of their trafficker, only to have the trafficker not convicted or to receive a very light sentence. Sometimes survivors have a lot of trauma and stress when they think about the fact that they may have to recount what has happened to them in court in front of strangers. So it's important to try to make the process as smooth as possible, and that can be achieved by doing a few things. First, if you're representing a survivor in a criminal case, it's always a good idea to reach out to the prosecutor to let him or her know the circumstances surrounding your client's exploitation. Sometimes you can have a phone call with the prosecutor in advance of the court date. Sometimes you can send an email. But whatever way you choose to communicate, letting them know that your client is coming to court, that he or she is a trafficking survivor, will go a long way in helping to reduce the trauma that this client experiences, because you're not explaining everything to the prosecutor in 5 minutes before the pretrial, and you're not running the risk of the client or the survivor overhearing you discuss personal matters with the prosecuting attorney. Also, again, if you're representing a client in a criminal matter who may have a pending warrant or an open warrant, reaching out to the officer in charge of the case is often a good idea. The reason you want to do this is so that the officer knows that your client is coming in to turn themselves in on the warrant, will make arrangements to be there, and also may make a positive recommendation to the court regarding bond. The last thing you want is to have your client show up for court for an arraignment, and the officer in charge of the case is either asking for a high bond or maybe isn't there at all. And you run the risk of your client being detained or having to post a cash bond in order to secure their appearance for the next court date. It goes without saying that it's very important to prepare your client for the court proceeding. If it's going to be a pretrial, letting the client know what to expect at that pretrial is really helpful in reducing their stress and any trauma that they may experience as a result of going back to court. If your client is going to be required to provide testimony, going over the line of questioning with your client well in advance and making sure that he or she doesn't have any questions or concerns about the questions being asked is also really important. Explaining to the client why you're asking the questions that you are will help them understand the purpose of the questioning, and also will relieve any stress that they feel as a result of having to recount very personal and very painful information. It's also important to consider obtaining documentation in support of your client prior to court so that it's ready to present to the judge and or the prosecuting attorney if necessary. This type of documentation could include letters from a residential treatment program, a counselor that your client may be seeing, verification of employment or schooling, anything that will help the court see how well your client is doing now and how far they have come since they were in this situation where they were exploited. The Joseph Project often does letters of support for our clients, and by doing so provides a little bit of history for the court regarding how the survivor came to the Joseph Project, and verification of the fact that they are a trafficking survivor is also helpful. In the event that you're required to file documents for the court with regard to your client's history of exploitation, for example, if you're doing a sentencing memorandum in support of a particular result in a case, these documents may contain very personal information about your client's history, things that your client would not want known by the general public or placed in a public file. It's important to file these type of documents and these type of motions under seal so that it won't be added to the court file and be available for the public. If that's not an option, then I would ask for an in-camera review so that the court can review, perhaps these are counseling records, perhaps they're just records containing very personal information about your client's history of being exploited, those can be reviewed by the court in camera so that you don't run the risk of having that information disseminated. Finally, if you are in court and you have to have some information relayed to the court that is very sensitive in nature, it's always a good idea to ask to approach the bench and discuss that information with the court so that it's not being heard by the other people that are in the courtroom. Following some of the tips that are laid out in this video will help the client to reduce the amount of stress that he or she may feel in going back to court, and will also help to set the client up for the best possible outcome. Representing human trafficking survivors gives attorneys the opportunity to use their skill set in a way that will vastly improve the life of another person. As a practicing attorney, there are a few things that I found more gratifying than working with survivors. They are often so appreciative of the efforts that the attorneys make on their behalf and very, very thankful for the outcomes. Oftentimes, you may be the only person in the legal system that has treated them with respect and with kindness, and they will never forget the impact that you have on their lives. Using your skill set and expertise allows you to be a part of the journey for a survivor from exploitation to empowerment. Thank you for watching, and we at the Joseph Project look forward to working with you as we help survivors move forward.